Welcome to Belonging Reimagined. I'm your host, Dr. Mona. As a mental health therapist, professor, and researcher, I guide folks in owning their belonging journey and exploring barriers to belonging. In this podcast, I explore real stories with phenomenal guests about how to experience both interconnection and interdependence. And my hope for you is that you learn ways to experience more connection in the world around you and the world within yourself. We don't have to do this life thing alone. You're right where you belong. We have Nancy Levin with us today, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. We met through a mutual friend, and I believe it was a DM kind of situation on social after our friend had mentioned us to one another, and you were so friendly. You were so friendly right away in DM and so warm, and I could feel that immediately. And, you know, not everyone's like that, and I just appreciated you so much. And we had an upcoming conference that we were going to where you were presenting on this very topic that we're going to delve into right now on shadow work. And I had already signed up for your session without even knowing that we were going to connect. And so we get to this conference and I'm in the restroom, I'm washing my hands, lots of people, of course, tons of people there. And I look over and I see somebody walk in. I was like, is that the same person that I saw in the little picture on social media? I think it's the same. Is that Nan? I think so. I look, I saw your name tag. I was like, I don't want to stare. And I'm like, it is. And you caught my eye. You caught me. And we were like, spark, and hugs and all this. It was so funny. It was actually really funny.
Like the minute I saw you, there was an instant recognition like, oh, there you are. I know you. It was wonderful.
Oh, I felt that too. And that, by the way, I know you, is that it feels more than just like I recognize you. Like I know you and I felt that from you.
Yeah.
And so you turn me around, you're like, look at us in the mirror, look at us in the mirror. And you're like, look, we can be sisters. And so ever since you've been cousin Nancy and like it or not, that's who you are. You're cousin Nancy. And it felt like family. You really did feel like a sense of family.
Same.
Right away. And I know we don't know each other, but I feel like we know each other, you know?
Totally. So, I totally feel the same way.
Yeah. Then I go into your session. So here I am feeling like this light being around you, right? And then we go into your session and it was dark. Like for me, all this darkness kind of came over. And then as I left your session, I felt this darkness kind of lift off of me because, you know, even though I actually used to do workshops called Befriending Your Shadow Self, you know, there's always more to be done. And you had mentioned that there's always more shadow work to be done. And one of my shadow selves or, you know, parts kind of had emerged during that session as you know, was your intention. And it kind of hit me really hard. So then I was like, does Nancy think I'm weird? And I'm like, no, but this is what we do.
This is what we do. And of course not. And the deeper we're willing to get in there, the more gold we're going to find.
Yeah. And it can really leave you feeling really vulnerable at times. And so for people who aren't familiar, first of all, with what the shadow is, with your expertise, can you just share, you know, briefly, what is the shadow self or what is the shadow?
Sure. So the shadow in this context that we are using it was first coined by Swiss psychoanalyst Carl Jung. And essentially, it is the reservoir of our unconscious where the parts of ourselves that we deny, suppress, repress get relegated to. So what lives in the shadow is the parts of us that we don't want to be and don't think we are, as well as the parts of us that we do want to be, but think we're not. And then all of this becomes a breeding ground for shadow beliefs, shadow commitments, shadow desires, anything that is hidden from ourselves and driving the bus of our lives.
And how does it drive the bus of our lives? What does that look like?
The qualities that we end up rejecting and disowning, we shove down into the shadow. And again, qualities that we don't want to be or qualities that we do want to be, we reject both our dark and our light. And the beliefs that we form, which ultimately are conclusions we draw about ourselves, these beliefs we go through our lives believing, even though they have no basis in reality. And the same with these commitments, these promises we made to ourselves, these coping strategies, survival mechanisms. All of this ends up being what we take out into the world, and it informs and impacts every relationship we have, every circumstance we're in, every situation we find ourselves in, because ultimately our beliefs are magnetic. So if we believe on some level, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm unlovable, we begin to attract toward us people, circumstances, situations that reinforce what we believe about ourselves. And it's only that we came up with this belief based on an event that occurred in childhood. Something significant, it can be something traumatic, but it also can be something seemingly simple to the naked eye that had a deep emotional impact. And it becomes the way that we interpreted what happened and made it mean something about us. So all of this is what creates the persona we put forth in the world. So if I, at an early age, get the messaging, it's not okay to be needy, I will push needy away into the shadow. And then I will overcompensate for neediness with being super independent and self-sufficient. And if I'm in some way get the messaging to sort of turn down an element of my light. So if, for example, I get straight A's, but then get bullied in school for getting straight A's, for being so smart, I might decide, well, I'm going to dim down my intelligence so I can fit in.
Somebody said something to me the other day that instantly brought tears to my eyes, Nancy. They said, when you were a child, you had to dumb yourself down to feel a sense of belonging and a sense of connection. And it was a social survival mechanism. And I'm 50 years old right now, and it has taken literally decades for me to allow my brilliance to come through and to say, I'm really brilliant. I mean, it's still super uncomfortable. I mean, it's incredibly uncomfortable for me to say that right now. But I'm going to say it.
Yes.
I'm going to model. I'm going to say it.
Say
but
it.
It's really, really hard. Because what? Tell me more, because I need reinforcements.
Well, because first of all, you're reclaiming a lost part of yourself that you, in reaction to something or someone, made a choice at a very early age. And it's essentially, like you said, belonging, connection, safety. Because we all have parts of ourselves that we believe, if I showed you, you wouldn't love me anymore. Yeah. If you saw this about me, if you knew this about me, you wouldn't love me anymore, and I wouldn't be accepted anymore. And so we expend a lot of energy, typically under the age of 10, crafting this persona. So it's not okay to be needy, or it's not okay to be smart. It's not okay to be lazy. It's not okay to be bold. Whatever it might be, that we essentially got the messaging really early as we were packaging ourselves to be palatable to everyone around us.
To be palatable.
To be digestible.
to be digestible, because what we're trying to avoid is isolation.
We're trying to avoid isolation. And we're trying to avoid criticism and judgment. And what we don't necessarily know so young is that if we're fearing external criticism and judgment, all it means is that we are already doing internally to ourselves what we're fearing from the external world.
What does that look like?
Yeah. So
break that down for folks.
If I fear external criticism or judgment, because most of us go through life with this, well, what will they think? What will other people say? What will other people think? We think we are fearing their judgment and criticism. However, what's really happening is we are already in judgment of ourselves. Once we are in right relationship with ourselves, once we're in forgiveness, once we're in acceptance, once we're in alignment, no judgment or criticism from the outside has any Velcro to stick to.
Oh. No Velcro to stick to, because we are the other side of that coin, of the other side of that Velcro.
Right. So instead of having our antenna outward, what do they think? What do they need? What do they feel? What do they want? The invitation here really is to turn the antenna inward. What do I think? What do I need? What do I feel? What do I want? And how do I get in right relationship with myself? How do I make right with myself anything that is causing me discomfort or shame or fear?
Yeah.
This is where inside I need to make it right.
Shadow work is so much about self-belonging.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with, the 3 layers of belonging, as I've defined it, is seeing yourself, embracing yourself, celebrating yourself. And they're all very different.
Yep.
Seeing yourself is identifying those different parts, those different quirks that we have, our values, our likes, our dislikes. The embracing is really that intrapsychic connection with self, and accepting, loving unconditionally. And then the celebrating is really about acknowledging publicly or privately, even within our own interior, that we have this lived experience, that we have this part of ourselves, and celebrating that in terms of uplifting that in some way. And when we're talking about shadow work, we're going to the very basics of, first of all, naming those shadow parts. So how does someone name their shadow parts?
Looking at the people in your life that you feel triggered and activated by. We all know what it feels like to get triggered.
That's the one that got me.
Yeah. Get triggered, get activated. Anyone who is just bugging the hell out of us, anyone who gets on our last nerve, and then identifying the quality. So it's really important to separate behavior and quality. Mm-hmm. What I mean is, an example I will often use is my ex-husband. He didn't work and didn't want to work. So it was very easy for me to point a finger at him. You're so lazy. The behavior was not working. The quality I distilled it down to that was a trigger for me was lazy. Mm-hmm. There are many qualities that could be associated. Irresponsible, careless. We each are going to have our own triggers. So my overcompensation then for lazy, because I had disowned lazy, I am not lazy. My overcompensation was being a workaholic.
You disowned the part of you that's lazy.
I don't want to be lazy. I'm not lazy. And in fact, to prove to you how not lazy I am, I will overwork. Now, when we disown a quality and we shove it into the shadow. As we reject it in ourselves, we end up projecting it out onto someone else. And they just become a mirror to reflect back to us the part of ourselves that we've disowned. Because the bottom line is we are every single quality. Any quality I can see in anyone else exists within me. So if I see lazy, it means I am lazy.
That's going to be a tough pill for people to swallow.
Believe me, it was a tough pill for me to swallow. It didn't come overnight.
Though.
Of course. And so why I say it's so important to separate it out from the behavior is that I have to find my own lazy, how I express my own laziness. Mm-hmm. So my version of lazy is laying on the sofa on a Tuesday afternoon, binge watching 5 episodes of my favorite show. There's my lazy. And then looking at the gift of lazy. Lazy allows me to rest, rejuvenate, refresh, relax. So then I can come into the place where I can be accepting of the existence of lazy inside of me. Now, I'll tell you, I can remember probably about 15 years ago when I really dove deeply into this work, saying I am lazy made me want to throw up, break out into hives, just to say I am lazy, to really own I am lazy. And so it's not something that happens overnight. But what can slowly begin to really land is I am everything. And it's not an either or. So it's important to also remember I'm not lazy or a workaholic. I'm lazy and a workaholic. I have capacity for both. And listen, I might be a workaholic 90% of the time and lazy 10% of the time. That's fine. Doesn't mean all the time. It just means that I'm willing to own that both of these are true.
And then what happened to you, Nancy, as you started to own your laziness in terms of how you saw other people?
I like to look at it like we are covered in wall outlets, electrical outlets. And when I reclaim a part of me, so when I reclaim lazy, I put one of those baby plastic protectors in that outlet so nothing can plug in. And so I don't get triggered by laziness in others. I have compassion for laziness. Now, I want to be really clear, again, going back to the behavior versus the quality. I don't have to like someone's behavior. And in fact, I ended up getting divorced. So we can take action and set boundaries around behavior. But in terms of the quality itself, freedom comes when we are able to be in our wholeness. And wholeness comes from reclaiming all of these qualities. Jung said, I'd rather be whole than good. And it's right there, because really the journey of embracing our shadow is the journey to wholeness, the journey away from compartmentalization, the journey away from rejection and disowning. It is really the journey toward reclaiming every part of ourselves and finding the gift within it so we can harness its untapped resource, its untapped energy.
And going back to your ex-husband, you can look at him and say, this person and his behavior and the way he approaches life doesn't align with mine, but you can do that without judgment now.
Right. And I don't have to point a finger and I don't have to label, any way in which we label other people, that is also the invitation to look at where does this live in me? Anytime we're, looking outward and feeling frustrated by someone else, to really get underneath it to the quality. And then the same thing happens on the flip side, which is anyone who we feel enamored by, anyone we feel enthralled by, inspired by. We want to look at the qualities that they exhibit. that they're shining into the world. So these are qualities like generous, intelligent, creative, courageous. And we want to look at how does this live in me also, even though I disowned it? And chances are, again, under the age of 10, something happened that had us dim down the light, like you were saying about smart. We can disown creative if, we brought a painting home from school and our parent told us, you suck. You'll never, you'll never make money being an artist or whatever
gosh,
it might
how many
be.
people have heard that?
Right,
Yeah.
sure. So then we internalize, well, I guess I'm not creative. So we disown that. And then we are drawn to people in the outer world who express that quality because really they're shining it back at us so that we can reclaim it.
I have to sit with that for a minute. Because when you talk about Carl Jung saying he'd rather be whole than good, that goodness, in order to be good, that inherently requires some kind of judgment. Right? There's good, bad, right, wrong. All of those are going to live in some dichotomous relationship with one another. And so that means if you're this, then you're that. If you're not this, then you're that. And it's this back and forth that is really exhausting to live in that kind of space, truly.
Yeah. And the way I really view this is that any quality in itself is not good or bad. It's really charge neutral. We end up putting the spin on it because with every quality, we're going to be able to see that there is a quote unquote dark side to it and a quote unquote light side to it. And that we can choose to call upon any quality at any time and reap the benefit of the gifts it has for us.
And help it serve us in some way.
Help it serve us, absolutely.
So without going into too much detail, when we were in your session,
yes,
that walks through the process of really kind of activating these parts within ourselves. One of the things that came up was there's a certain type of person that came to mind for me. It wasn't a specific person. It was a certain type of person. And when I looked at the quality, there's a certain entitlement that really is activating for me. And I think particularly growing up in the home of the Ku Klux Klan, with big curly hair. Yep. It's not today, but it often is. Yep. It often is. And brown skin. And it was scary oftentimes. I was around a lot of people that lived in entitlement. And so it was really violent. That entitlement was used as violence towards me. And interestingly, when you asked about like the qualities of the person that we were seeing that's very activating for us, violence wasn't the word that came to mind, even though that was the behavior, right? The quality was entitlement. And I had to sit and think about, well, how can I use entitlement then to benefit me? If it's charge neutral, how can I use entitlement to benefit me? And one of the things that came up almost immediately was actually being more entitled to my time boundaries, and saying, not necessarily saying no to people, but more saying no to myself. Like, no, you're not going to go do this and this and this and that all at the same time because I'm autistic and I have to learn to really encompass that entitlement a lot more in order to protect my nervous system. And I haven't been doing that. I haven't been doing that because I want to do all the things, right? I'm creative and I want to do all the things. And it has really been life-changing for me since I saw you a few weeks ago. Really life-changing.
I'm
And
so
the
glad
times
to
when I
know.
don't do it, I can name it now. I can say, oh, I wasn't entitled enough. I wasn't entitled enough.
Right.
It doesn't mean I have to go be an asshole to people. It doesn't mean I have to be violent with that entitlement the way that it has been for me. And do you know that I have not been drawing those people towards me anymore?
Right. Of course.
And if I do, if those people come towards me, they don't behave that certain kind of way towards me.
Yeah.
In just less than 2 months since I've seen you.
I believe
total
it.
shift.
That is what happens. That is.
Of course you believe it. Of course you believe it. That's what you do.
I mean, that's the power of this work. And that's why I really do feel like this is at the heart of any kind of self-development, any kind of self-empowerment, self-improvement. This really is what is at the heart, because it's giving us the opportunity to take an honest look at ourselves. And, Socrates famously said, an unexamined life is not worth living.
That is the truth.
Right?
Because
it's the truth.
It is flat and two-dimensional. I know we're in a three-dimensional world, but it's a flat life out here.
Yeah.
If we're just like going through the motions day in, day out.
Right. And I think that ultimately is really the best endorsement for shadow work, because this is how we really begin looking at the truth of who we are and examining how we crafted the version of ourselves that we sent out into the world, and how we can actually return to the essence of the truth of who we are. And again, be in right relationship, be in alignment with that truth, and express ourselves from there. And the grown-up version of ourselves, the adult version, gets to come in and rewire what we believed when we were children.
And so if we're listening to Socrates and heeding the call, right? How do we examine these parts of ourselves and still feel a sense of safety? Because as you said, it can be very triggering. It can be very activating to our nervous system, to that fight, flight, flee, flop, freeze. There's 6 Fs now. I can't remember all of them, and I'm a therapist. How do we examine our lives in a way that feels safe in our bodies?
One of the things is to really allow ourselves to recognize that whatever it is that we believe in terms of what's holding us back was formed at a very early age, when we were not able to process and digest what was happening in a healthy or realistic way. One of the significant events in my own life that led to several different shadow beliefs was my older brother being born essentially fatally ill, and him dying when I was 2. And so upon coming into the world, beliefs set in around, my needs are not important. His needs are more important than mine. So better I have no needs. Thus, essentially already disowning needy and leaning into self-sufficient and independent. When he died because he had been ill, a belief really set in around perfectionism. Like, in order to be safe, I need to be perfect. If I am imperfect, I will die. So we start forming these beliefs at a really early age. They're not conscious, but they last, and they're going to keep informing everything we do until we're willing to look at them. And then I can look at, wow, I disown my needs to such a degree that I entirely lost myself. I lost myself in work. I lost myself in my marriage. So I actually need to own I am needy. And I need to really look at, how do I hold I am needy and independent? And once we start tracing beliefs back to an occurrence, to an event, and like I said, it may be a traumatic event. It might also just, something that would seemingly be benign, but did have some weight to it. Something that happened in school, in the playground, something that happened at home, something that happened with a friend, anything. We make it mean something about us. We draw a conclusion about ourselves. And that right there is what we as adults need to flip the script on. So the way to do it safely is to first realize I did the only thing I knew how to do at that moment. I made this mean the only thing I could make it mean. But now I have a choice about what to believe. And I can also look for past proof around that belief being proven untrue. So even if it is, I'm not enough or I'm unlovable. Can I find an example, past proof that I am in fact lovable? Yes. Mm-hmm. And then I get to now create a new empowering belief that supports me and take action with that belief instead of believing the old belief that was holding me back.
And taking stock of the environment.
Yes.
Saying, I'm not in the same environment anymore.
Right.
Maybe it was safer for me at that time to take on these beliefs. But now the environment is such that there's no danger. There's no danger in owning these parts of myself again.
Yeah. And, and also, looking at, and probably one of the aspects of the shadow that I find most fascinating are these shadow commitments that we made to ourselves when we were young to stay safe, to feel a sense of belonging, to cope, to navigate. And these commitments are what we end up still serving if we are not aware of them. So they're hidden, they're underlying, they're shadow. I am a firm believer that we can create anything that we're committed to. And the problem is most people don't really know what they're committed to. They think they're committed to one thing, but they're actually underneath it all committed to something else. So I can say I want, I say I want a relationship. What I'm experiencing is staying home alone.
Okay.
Then looking at what old commitment am I still serving that kept me safe as a child? Well, as a kid, I was committed to isolation because that's how I felt safe. I felt safe in my room alone. I felt safe with my books. I felt safe writing. I didn't have a lot of friends. I didn't feel so safe with people. So I have been committed to isolation. Yet if I want a relationship, I need to shift that commitment. I need to shift a commitment to open myself to love, to open myself to, possibility of companionship.
Yeah. So if someone is committed to isolation or whatever that shadow,
or whatever,
be,
sure,
whatever it is, but let's stick with isolation because so many people, particularly with what's been going on the last few years with the pandemic. That was, when we were in lockdown, and isolation was huge theme globally that we were experiencing. People were trying to date during that time and trying to figure out how to do that. And that still seems to be a trend, right? Still happening now, even though we're not in lockdown period anymore. How does someone change that commitment?
So here's the important thing to remember. Being committed to isolation kept me safe as a child. It served me when I was young. Here's the thing about these shadow commitments. The very thing that served me as a child is the seed of self-sabotage as an adult.
Goosies.
Yeah. So I have to now, again, adult me, grown-up me, gets to look at and acknowledge this served me when I was young. I made this promise. I put this commitment in place for a reason. But currently in my life, it holds me back from what I say I want. And then from there, I need to be willing to flip it. So it can sometimes be as simple as the opposite. So for example, I think what I would say here is, okay, the new commitment is going to be, instead of being committed to isolation, I'm committed to connection.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not enough just to say, okay, I'm committed to connection. It's, what is the action I'm willing to take? What is the micro action I'm willing to take in the next 24 hours that serves connection instead of isolation?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call a friend and go for a walk. I'm going to go to a concert. I'm going to go whatever, I'm going to put myself into a position, into a place of the possibility for connection.
Right. And it could be connection with anybody.
Anybody.
It could be connection with anybody where you feel some sense of safety at least.
Yeah.
And or not. Maybe you're willing to stretch a little bit, Maybe you don't go to restaurants, and even just going to a restaurant and being by yourself, or going to a movie by yourself and being in connection with community in some way, even if you're not talking with them, could be a micro step. And then taking stock of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, from there, okay, I did this, what's next? I did this, what's next? Because we're really wanting, if we look at, if I say I want a relationship and what I'm experiencing is aloneness, and what I've been committed to is isolation and relationship are never going to align. So I need to commit to something that is in alignment with relationship. So if I shift to being committed to connection, a whole world of opportunity and possibility and options open up to me.
Here's what I hear so many people say. They're like, I'm getting out there though. I'm putting it out there. If you're going through the motions without the energy of connection, or if you're going through the emotions with the energy of desperation, it's still perpetuating isolation.
Well, right. And what I'll bring in here too is, if we look at specifically relationship, I really do believe that relationship is one long continuum with a revolving door. And we are the common denominator in all of our relationships. So ultimately, if we're not willing to do this kind of work, we will recreate over and over and over again the same relationship with a different person.
Oh, absolutely. Because the person changes, but the part of you that you haven't delved into hasn't changed. It's still sitting there dormant.
Right. So, I'll always say, as unpopular as it might sound, for the people looking for love, it has to begin within. And,
the great irony.
Yeah, of course. It has to begin within.
It really does. And we have a culture right now that's moving more mainstream into this interest of personal development and spiritual development. And with that, I see often paired with that is really a lot of toxic positivity. And we are really self-abandoning so much of who we are. When we go, ironically, on these personal development journeys that don't include pausing, sitting, reflecting, seeing, embracing, celebrating those shadow parts, those parts that, as you said, I love how you said this, Nancy, that we've pushed into the shadows, that we've repressed into the shadows and to these darker parts. And guess what the shadow is doing? The shadow is following you right behind you. It's right there.
And here's the thing. The unaddressed aspects of your shadow will come out sideways.
Oh, yeah, it will.
Right? Yes. They will come out when least expected, least desired. They can take you out health-wise, emotionally, you name it. So they're going to come out one way or another. The way I look at it is, let's do this in an intentional way instead of being, being sucker punched, essentially.
Right. Let's do it on our terms.
On our terms.
And that's what makes it an empowering process. It really does.
Yeah.
And then we can belong back to ourselves again and not project our shit all over everybody, and then create a shit storm and then go and then be the victim of our own shit storm. Like, everybody's doing this to me,
Yeah. I mean, it's really incredibly empowering to stand in the place of no longer holding other people responsible for the quality of your own life and letting go of blame and victimhood and stepping truly into responsibility and empowerment around our own lives.
Absolutely. So I'm going to sit my ass right here and I'm going to be lazy sometimes.
Good.
And I'm going to be brilliant sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be entitled sometimes.
Yes.
And I'm telling you, I've been walking more without my cane.
Yes.
I've been walking without my cane for the first time in 10 plus years. And I've had 8 hip surgeries.
Wow.
I'm serious. I really feel it, this energy shedding off of my body since. And I did this work before, but I'm doing it like I'm revisiting this shadow work, Nancy, because of your invitation. And for that, I could cry. I thank you so, so deeply. I really, really do, because I feel like I am belonging back to myself again. And because I'm belonging back to myself again, I'm feeling more at ease in my interpersonal relationships. I feel a sense of community in a deeper way than I already have. And I have incredible community. We have the largest mental health group practice in the state. Amazing, amazing people. So I feel community, but I feel it even stronger with them now. And even within my family, it's been beautiful. The work that you're doing makes a difference. It really, really does, because it becomes a domino effect for the people that are in our lives. And so with that, I ask you, what does belonging mean to you?
Safety inside myself. That's really the first thing that comes, is a sense of safety inside myself, a sense of acceptance inside myself. Yeah, that's what belonging means for me.
Belonging is safety within myself. Oh, I'm going to copy and paste that. I could tell you, I really am. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Everyone go out and get Nancy's new journal. I've had the great honor of being able to get a sneak peek at it.
Yes.
And I can tell folks this is one you want to pick up for sure. For sure it is life-changing. Just doing one exercise on one shadow quality has been life-changing, life-giving, transformational for me. So as we go in and do more and more and more and more and more and more, I'm going to be up in the clouds floating. I mean, this is amazing.
I love
Thank you
it.
so much for being here, Nancy. I love you. I appreciate you. I respect you. I can't wait to see you again. Hopefully, we don't have to wait until we run into the bathroom somewhere. we can plan it out. But I thank you so much for not just what you're doing, but who you are. All the parts, all the parts.
Thank you, Mona. I feel all the same ways about you, and I do look forward to a big hug again soon.
Mwah.
Mwah.
Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. All of the show notes and links can be found on my website at drmonanour.com. That's drmonanour.com. Throughout most episodes, you'll hear me referring to the belonging model that I developed, which is represented by a belonging life map that helps you explore areas in your life where you feel more connection and areas where you might feel more isolation. And you can get a free copy of your own belonging life map on my website. Again, that's drmonanour.com. If you like the Belonging Reimagined podcast, please subscribe and consider leaving us a review. That can help more folks find us and keep more episodes coming. Until next time, I'm Dr. Mona. You're right where you belong.